Welcome to the Mind Body Couple podcast.
I'm Tanner Murtaugh.
And I'm Ann Hampson.
This podcast is dedicated to helping you unlearn chronic pain and symptoms.
If you need support with your healing, you can book in for a consultation with one of our therapists at painpsychotherapy.ca.
Or purchase our online course at embodycommunity.com to access in-depth education, somatic practices, recovery tools, and an interactive community focused on healing. Links in the description of each episode.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you for that intro, Tanner.
I know that for people listening, this is the second time now we've done this intro.
Yes.
The first time we had like an awkward silence as me and Ann were looking at each other being like, who talks next?
Yeah, so we are redoing this, but Tanner's decided to keep his hello, everyone intro.
Yeah, mixing it up.
Yeah. Tanner's going to try that throughout different podcasts, so be aware that subtly he's going to make the intro different.
A little bit different each time.
Yeah. I also have to say I'm happy to be back on the podcast right now because I know Paul took my place last week, and that made my heart hurt a little bit in a sense that he was fulfilling my spot here on the podcast.
Yeah. He's my work brother.
Yeah. If you listened to the podcast last week, they talk a lot about how much he and Tanner are alike in their pain and symptom stories.
Yeah, we are very similar. And, Paul was great, but I'm glad you're back, Ann.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back, and I hope our listeners, at least some of them, are happy I'm back, too. I understand if you felt a connection with Paul, too, though.
You imagine, after this episode, we just get all these comments being bring Paul back.
Oh, my gosh. If you feel that way, understand. I might be a bit hurt if I read all those comments, though. So I'm just saying that out there.
Be kind in the comments section.
Be kind. That's right. But we want to get into our topic today. And so we are doing part 1 of blended states of the nervous system you need to practice being in to heal chronic pain and illness.
Mm-hmm. This is a 4-part series.
Yes.
We're going to not do an order. It's we're going to slowly release this over the next few months. And it's an essential one. I think when we talk about states of the nervous system, I want to give people just a refresher. I know the words are jargony. They're made by a neuroscientist, not by a therapist. And so people get a bit lost. But when we understand the autonomic nervous system, often when I first teach it to clients, I explain it as these 3 neat and tidy separate states. So we have ventral vagal, which is really where we feel safe, we feel connected, calm, at ease, productive. I think this is really where people would pay to be. This is a great state to hang out in.
Totally. I think this is everyone's, in some way, goal. And I think as we keep talking about it, we'll learn that you can't always be in this state. But a lot of people, they want to learn how to get more ventral vagal state. Yeah,
we want to give, again, I always tell my clients the same really dry joke that you could be in therapy for 50 years. You're never going to always be here. That is not going to happen. And you're not built like that as a human. But at the same time, we want to give people more access.
Yes.
And with the blended states we're about to talk to, they always have an element of ventral, which makes them a very useful blended states to be in. Next, we have your sympathetic system.
And I think this one, a lot of people really would relate to really being in most of the time, especially when we're struggling with chronic pain and symptoms.
Yeah, this is, for many years, this was my home base.
Yes, it was your home base.
My home
it
base.
Can still be your home base, Tanner.
If I'm not careful, it's...
Today, it might be your home base. We're doing some Christmas setup. I feel like you're going to go into sympathetic zone right away.
We've had some rough Christmas setups with the kids in the past. So sympathetic, here's the thing, is it's not all negative. Because it often gets associated with fight or flight, fear, anger kind of states. But at the beginning of going in sympathetic, you're just mobilized. Like I always explain to people, like even right now, Anne, you and I, there is some sympathetic energy.
Yes.
I can promise you all this would be such a boring podcast if there wasn't a little bit of mobilized energy where me and Anne are bantering back and forth. So we need that. We need the sympathetic energy to be there. But for a lot of people that just nosedive into fight or flight right away, they're not even like mobilized.
And I think I've noticed that sometimes when I'm talking to people, they go into the sympathetic energy. It's not necessarily wrong or bad or negative, like you're saying. Like it's just kind of part of day to day. But then that's right. It gets kind of out of control. It gets paired with fight or flight or anxiety, say, or spiral type thinking. And then it can go over the edge.
Yes. And lastly, we have the dorsal vagal system. This is a very common state, especially for a lot of people that have experienced trauma. Going to a dorsal vagal place is really, really normal. Essentially, we start to become immobilized in this state. We start to feel frozen, numb, shut down, despair, hopeless, helpless. I think shame and guilt can really live in this dorsal place. And a very common survival response that most of us, if not all of us, in my opinion, go into at points as a human being.
Now, we know probably a lot of you guys that are following our podcast have been like, we've heard you talk about these states before, Tanner. Why is it important to revisit it in today's podcast?
Well, we're going to talk about one of 4 blended states that are very essential. And I love to give a refresher on this because you don't need to kill off the sympathetic or dorsal vagal energy. You don't. That's not possible. When we talk about chronic pain and symptoms, they often are triggered and perpetuated when you're in this prolonged state of sympathetic fight or flight or dorsal kind of shutdown. But I can promise you at some point today, I'm going to be in sympathetic with Christmas setup and our children.
Yes.
There's no doubt.
Yes.
And I'm not going to have necessarily symptoms come up, hopefully. But usually I can go there and that's not the case. But when I was first recovering, I was just in this prolonged way of sympathetic or dorsal. And as a result, my chronic pain was perpetuated. Now, the thing about these 3 states, as we're saying, is there's blends, useful blends. And we're going to talk about in this series, in each one of the episodes, a different blended state. All of them really essential to practice. We need to get access to them. We need to be able to shift to them with more ease because they can help us heal our chronic pain and chronic symptoms.
Well, I think along with access to them and shifting to them, it's important to start learning to recognize them. Am I in this blended state? What makes it a blended state? And understanding that is not, like you're saying, not just the 3. There's kind of a spectrum or mixes.
Yes. So today's blended state, the blended state of the day.
Oh, I like that.
Sounds good, right?
That's pretty good.
That's great.
Can we name this podcast that?
The
blended state of the day. Play.
There you go.
So, okay, I just announced it there.
There you go. So
Okay.
play. We're going to talk about play. You know, a quote or the way that Deb Dana and Dr. Porges talk about it is play is a neural exercise that strengthens your ability to flexibly transition between activity and calm. And play is this blend. It's a blend of ventral vagal, where you feel some safety and connection, but then you also have the sympathetic system where you're mobilized. So it mixes safety and connection with this mobilized energy.
And I think many of us listening can probably sit back and pinpoint a time where they were in this play state and felt what you're describing, Tanner.
Yeah, because you're kind of going back and forth. If you want to stay in a state of play, you can't just continuously become more immobilized. All that mobilization is going to cause a lot of dysregulation and probably kick into fight or flight. My great example, because we're doing Christmas setup today, is kids on Christmas morning.
Oh, yeah.
This is exactly it. You wake up, we have this little ledge that they, like railing that they can look over and they see all the presents.
Yes.
my son and my daughter are stoked. They're like
Oh, yeah.
excited. They're shaking. They
They're
get
shaking in sympathetic
yeah, but
energy.
it's still play.
Yes.
You know, they're being playful with us. They're being kind to us. They're so thankful Santa came, and they go down. They start playing. But with kids, they're still learning this. As adults, we're still learning it too. And what happens is they get more and more mobilized and more mobilized. And eventually it just like causes like emotional breakdown to take place.
And I think many people that have kids know what you're talking about and like witness this.
Yes. And this happens to us as adults as well, where we start to become playful and then it becomes sympathetic.
Do you have an example where that's happened for you, Tanner, as an adult?
Yeah. So I'm trying to think of like, now I'm really good in the state of play overall. When I was first healing, it was difficult.
Yeah.
Play's a difficult state. And, you know, even things like playing volleyball or playing ping pong or doing some type of sport, I would get excited so much that I would start to become very dysregulated in fight or flight.
I actually remember this. Can we share with them a little bit about your ping pong tournaments in
Hmm.
Mexico? I think this is a pretty good segue because was it our
It
honeymoon?
was,
Yeah, we're on our honeymoon. And I think you were
I was,
really just learning this approach still, right?
yeah, I'm trying to think. I was maybe like 2 or 3 months into using it. So I wasn't fully healed yet,
Yeah.
but I was really starting to become a bit more active. And one thing about me is I love ping pong.
Totally, totally. And you're pretty good at it, Tanner.
Thank you.
Yeah. Wow. You really wanted me to say that right
Oh,
now. Like
yes.
share that with people.
Great.
Yeah.
Great pride in my ping pong playing
Yeah.
ability
And so we stayed at an all-inclusive resort and they had a ping pong table and they had like ping pong tournaments
every
rolling
day.
every day. And I remember you were very excited to find this out.
Yeah. And it was also an element of graded exposure because I hadn't done jagged movements
Yes.
or like whipped my arm around or run after the ball. Like these were new things. But I went for it. And to be honest, it went pretty well. Like my body, like it was a big kind of healing win to some degree where I was like all of a sudden able to use my body and I didn't feel much pain. And the fear of movement really reduced. But as the ping pong tournaments went on and on, day after day, I started to get worried about them. I started to like put all this pressure on them. And then all of a sudden, play was no longer enjoyable.
Right.
I was agitated. I was kind of fearful. You know, the first couple days were great, but day after day, and that's the thing is like when we talk about blended states, it's not like, oh yeah, just go play. Just go do that. Because the reality is play is a very difficult state for a lot of people to access. When we've experienced trauma, attachment injuries, bullying, neglect, abuse in relationships, you know, any sympathetic kind of mobilized energy, it can feel really overwhelming and dysregulating. And people have like distrust or abuse in relationships, which can essentially, if you're playing with someone else, it amplifies signals of danger and quiets these signals of safety.
Which is frustrating because when we think of play in its sense of the word, we hope that it brings safety, enjoyment, connection, right?
Yes.
And it can be confusing when we can't access that piece of the play.
Yeah, and I think it's being compassionate with yourselves, like if you're listening to this, and for some people, they can access play really easily. It works great for them. And that's wonderful. Like all these blended states in this 4-part series, some of them will be easier for you than others. Play was a hard one for me because I get so, like, once that sympathetic, mobilized energy comes on, I can nosedive into fight or flight so quick. It was a hard one to practice being in.
When you started to recognize that that was happening for you, Tanner, was that a bit of a turning point when you would notice that?
Yes, because I really had to practice, you know, being playful, mobilizing, but still trying to have one foot back in like a safe, connected state. So, like keeping my breathing slow or just pausing for a few minutes and then returning to play. Like, I think that's what we're kind of practicing. I've ran little experiments on our kids.
You have.
Oh yeah, this is this is
Oh,
this is
I feel like this is the first for me to know this,
yeah, I'm
Tanner.
always yeah, this is what I do in my spare time.
Our poor kids. This is like the pains of growing up with therapist parents, I think.
Yeah,
It's these
we're
experiments.
trying these like things. And our daughter, she seems to, with play, she has an easier time pulling back. So like she has an easier time, like if she's starting to get dysregulated, she'll go sit on the couch and relax for a bit. Our son, very similar to me, he'll just go and go and go. And, you know, I've done it with like, you've heard on our podcast, these dance parties that we do. I've done it based on song. Like, how many songs can my son play with until it starts to become an argument with someone, or until he's like, you know, battling, or all of a sudden, like, you can tell he's really anxious. And usually, right now, we're at about 2.5 songs. So we got
Are
like,
you increasing it?
I'm increasing it. So I'm doing the exposure. I'm doing exposure.
Good, okay.
You know, even for myself, like I'm very similar to him. And so like we need to learn this as kids. And if we didn't learn it as kids, we're not going to know how to do it as adults.
Right.
Like play is a learned skill. Like I think it's thinking about it in terms of some of that. And so I always suggest to people, it's kind of like light, silly movements can really support you in accessing a state of play. And at first, you're gonna need to put the behavior in before you almost feel it. Like the doing happens before the feeling. Like if someone's been in like deep depression, kind of dorsal shut down, like it is gonna be a practice of like giving yourself exposure in little pieces, these brief exposures to being playful. And if you're someone who struggles more with fight or flight, it's like you need to give yourself those little bursts of exposure, almost like I'm doing with our son. And so now comes the activity for all of you. This is this is something we do on the podcast a lot. We give people little activities. This is a fun activity though.
Yes. So,
Yes.
well, of course, because it's about play.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Some of our activities, people are like, I'm not doing that. And I totally get that. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's whatever you do or don't like to incorporate into your
These
time.
are optional. So each day, you want to engage in, 5 to 10 minutes of play. You need to go slow here as we talk about the healing window. How much sensation of play can you tolerate before you completely go flying in fight or flight or completely shut down?
And if that happens, that's okay. Again, it's building that awareness and that curiosity of what's going on when I access play.
Yeah. And then you just widen the exposure a bit. You widen the healing window. All of a sudden, maybe you're doing 12 minutes of play a day and increasing from there. There's different types of play people can utilize as well. There's social play involving 2 or more people. This is, any relationship. I say people, but it could also be with an animal.
Yeah.
Me and our dog Darla did a little bit of playing before this.
What does your play look like, Tanner?
Well, she does this game where she jumps on the couch. You know what I'm talking about? And she likes to do like these little nips, and she's like playing, and she likes to like wrestle a bit.
She rolls around on the couch.
She rolls around. She's just having a great time.
Yeah.
And so that's more kind of this social play. There's movement play, moving your body, dance, sports, yoga, dance parties.
Yeah. And I think it's really common for a lot of people to not engage in movement play, really. It's like we're moving to our car, or we're moving to get somewhere, but not in a playful way.
Yeah, and I think it's hard because movement can be viewed as dangerous by a lot of people who have chronic pain, chronic symptoms.
Yeah.
And so you're doing exposure to both. You're doing exposure to play, but you're also doing exposure to movement.
And I love this because this is a great way to change your relationship with both.
Yes.
With your body, with pain and symptoms, with movement, play.
If this is a little side note, this could be a whole podcast. I love at the end of podcasts, I'm like, oh, this could be a whole other podcast. What I see people do is like they're trying to do the great exposure to moving more, but it's so serious.
Yeah.
I relate to it where it's just like it's so serious and intense, and people are working towards things they don't even like doing.
Yes.
If that's happening, incorporating an element of play could be really, really beneficial.
Right, because you want to keep it this kind of light curiosity.
Yeah. We got more object play, video games, board games, puzzles, some type of
Mm.
object you're using.
Yeah.
And we have creative play. Get inspired, write a story, do a craft, play music, draw or paint.
Yeah.
Last weekend, me and my son, this is actually a type of play he can tolerate much better, is creative play.
Yes.
He's really good at it, actually. Like, we sat and did like watercolor pencil crayons. We did that for like an hour. And he was stoked on it. It was exciting, but it's just a form of like creative play.
And I know for you with art, Tanner, similar to the ping pong story, it's taken you a while to be able to do that without fully nosediving.
Yeah. I essentially, as I'm playing, and this is what I practice, and this is almost what I'm doing with our son as well, is I'm tracking basically my nervous system as I do it. And then I have to be really honest of like, I need to stop now.
Yes. Stopping doesn't mean stopping for the whole time. It can maybe mean pause and going back to it, but listening to that is important.
Yeah. Like with the dance party songs, as soon as I start to see that sympathetic energy in our son, it's like, okay, let's stop, have a breather, like get a snack. Like,
so how are you going to apply this then to today with Christmas setup?
yeah, we got to think, we
'Cause
got to have
that's an example. So you shared with people kind of what to do. How are we going to do that for today?
It's interesting because people probably think this was mapped out, but like we didn't think about the Christmas setup until we started recording, and now it's like the most relevant example.
Yes, and we really have to think about it
We
because
do.
I think already we want it to be playful, but I think we're a bit nervous about it, to be
yeah.
honest.
I say we almost like, we don't tell our kids this, but we set a timer of like 20 minutes
Okay.
and then we get a snack. And we set a timer of 20 minutes. And then it's like, like our daughter has to go practice being on the potty. Like we intentionally give these breaks from like the Christmas chaos.
Well, and I think that's a good idea, Tanner, because as that energy keeps kind of mounting, that will give time to shift
Yeah.
and kind of slow a little bit.
Look at us. This is great.
Yeah. Do you think we're going to follow this plan?
Oh, we're following it.
Okay. Good.
We're following it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You seem really intense about that, though. So.
I'm ready to go.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll keep you guys updated on how it went.
So thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you for listening.
Go practice being playful.
Yes.
You got this.
Yeah.
Take care.
Take care. Thanks for listening. For more free content, check out the links for our YouTube channel, Instagram, and Facebook accounts in the episode description.
We wish you all healing.